In order to develop Python programs, you first need to install Python, which you should have already done before you started this video. So if you haven't done that already, then stop the video, go back into Canvas and take care of that. In this video, we're going to install an IDE called Visual Studio Code. An IDE is it's an integrated development environment, and it's really just a fancy text editor. As opposed to something like Notepad, which we could use for our Java programs. An IDE is going to provide a lot of assistance to us. It's going to visually make it easier to see our code. It's going to run our program for us whenever we want to test it, things like that. There are many IDEs out there, and there are a lot of very good IDEs out there. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code in pretty much all the videos that I post for this class. And if you're using Visual Studio Code and you have trouble, there's a good chance that I'll be able to help you with it. So I think it's a really good choice. You don't have to use it. The code you produce is the same no matter what IDE you use, so I won't actually know the difference. But unless you have a compelling reason to use something else, I'm going to recommend that you go with Visual Studio Code. Very quickly, I want to point out that Visual Studio Code is not the same product as Visual Studio. They're both from Microsoft. They're both programming tools. We want to stick with Visual Studio Code. It is free and open source. It's available across platforms on Mac, Windows, and Linux. It's good for a very wide variety of languages, so it's a good one to get to know, even if it's not necessarily the very best one out there at any particular thing. If you know Visual Studio Code, you can use it for pretty much any programming language that's out there. The website to download it is code.visualstudio.com. And again, I want to emphasize that we need to have that code in there because we don't want to end up on the full Visual Studio download site. So at the time I'm recording it, this is what Visual Studio Code webpage looks like. There should be a prominent download link. It's going to attempt to detect what operating system you're on, and so it has detected that I'm on Windows right now. If it detects wrong or for some other reason you want to look around, you can click on other platforms. But for Windows, I'm going to go ahead and download the Windows program. I've already downloaded this in the interest of time. So it's going to save a file to your computer, probably the Downloads folder. And it's an executable, so I'm just going to double click on that to start the installation process. Just like other programs, you're going to have to agree to some terms. I think we can stick with our default settings here. If you want to have a desktop icon, you can do that. But I'm just going to go ahead and click through and install this with all of the default settings. It's not a very big program, so it doesn't take too long. And when it's done, I'm going to go ahead and let it launch the program. All right, so once this is finished installing, we are going to be greeted with kind of a welcome page here that provides almost like a wizard to walk you through setting up some configuration for Visual Studio Code. And you're welcome to go through all of that. At this point, you may or may not understand what all of it is, so I don't want to linger on it now, but you can see like you can pick a theme and those kinds of things. I'm going to skip all of that for the moment. I'm going to go ahead and close the Welcome tab up here. And I'm going to draw your attention to the kind of the navigation bar over on the left-hand side here. It's got some icons to help us navigate the program. And at the top is an explorer, and it's essentially like the way to interact with the files that we're going to use. And we'll get to that in a little bit. The one I'm interested in is down at the bottom. It is called Extensions, and so I'm going to click on that. The idea of Visual Studio Code is that by itself it's very lightweight, meaning it doesn't have a lot to it, but it's meant to be modular so that I can install extensions, which are essentially like plugins, that will add functionality that I find useful. And that way I don't have to have a bunch of functionality that I don't find useful. So I really appreciate that about Visual Studio Code. You can see I happen to have Java installed already, but so yours probably won't look like that. At this point, one of the extensions we want to install right away is to something that will help us with our development. In this case, if I'm doing Python, I'm going to come up to that little search window and I'm going to type Python. There are a bunch of results because there are a lot of Python programmers that use Visual Studio Code and have developed extensions for them. The one that I want to install at the moment is called the Python Extension Pack. And so you'll notice that it's not at the very top in my case. The official Microsoft one will add just the Python support. The extension pack will also add on a few other things that are useful and helpful. Not so much right away, but maybe as we get a little further into Python. So I'm clicking on that. You can see that this is a popular extension. At this time, it's been installed about 9 million times. So that's a good sign that we've got the right one, right? It's popular at least. So once I've selected that and I've confirmed that it's the one that I want, I'm going to go ahead and hit install. And depending on the size of the extension pack, this can take a little bit of time. So I will cut the video here and resume it when it's finished installing. And that did take a little bit of time. It's installing a lot of stuff there, but it looks like it is finished. A couple things here. Yours may land on a different screen than this. You may end up kind of back at a welcome screen. You also may get a pop-up asking you, especially if you're a Mac user, to install like some other command line tools or something like that. We've already got Python installed, so we don't need to install anything else. You can close any of that out. And at this point, you are done with the installation of Visual Studio Code and getting that ready for Python development. And we'll move on to another video where we will set up some folders and give it a try to see if it's working okay.